Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cascadia Speaks, the CascadiaNow webinar series highlighting the distinct regional and cultural identity of the Cascadia bioregion. I'm Bethany. I'm the CascadiaNow Communications Manager. And on behalf of CascadiaNow, we want to welcome you and thank you for being here to support and learn a little about what you can do to help your bioregion with building a positive team culture. You can view all of our Cascadia Speaks webinar videos on the CascadiaNow YouTube channel, and this video will be available there once today's event is concluded. You're also going to get an email with a link to today's video. So setting you up to get the most out of Cascadia Speaks, on the right of your screen you're going to see chat, and you're welcome to use the box at the bottom. Right on the right side to comment and to more importantly type your questions at any time. Our presenter today wants questions throughout the presentation. He'll also take questions at the end, but please chime in anytime, and I will be relaying your typed in questions to Ryan. Do remember that you're viewing the presentation with a 30 to 60-second delay, but you type those questions in anytime. I'll get them along as quickly as I can. So without further ado, let's get started with Cascadia Speaks, building a positive team culture. Our presenter today is Ryan Tymony. He's an expert in team dynamics who has spent the last 5 years at the Boeing Company educating all kinds of working teams. With extensive experience in developing and presenting team building content, Ryan's excited to share his positive team culture expertise and education in psychology with a focus on the dynamics of nonprofits, volunteer groups, and local startups. When not motivating teams, Ryan motivates audiences as a bass player and songwriter for the band Tigers in the Tank. Thank you so much for being here, Ryan.
Oh, good. I can talk now?
Yeah. You're here. Thanks for being here, and we're so excited for you to begin your presentation.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be talking to you all and to be meeting you, sort of. I don't know what any of you look like, but I'm sure you're lovely people. As we said before, I like interactive presentations and as interactive as can be. So if you have questions, just let me know. I don't mind going back and answering them. I'll try to leave some time at the end of the presentation as well to have discussions. So if you want to just write them down and have them there, I'll try to answer them as best as possible. I'll also be supplying contact information, so if you have a bigger question, we can set some time aside where I can give you a more in-depth answer. And with that being said, let's just get started. So this presentation is all about building a positive team, and the topics we'll be discussing is motivating your team, promoting your positive organizational behaviors, and problem-solving methods and management systems. Or the way I like to break it down is, how do you communicate to your team initially? Once you have your team, how do you cultivate a positive environment? And then how do you sustain that environment? You'll also be hearing me say quite a bit about your job as a leader, as for your ambassador, for your community, is to reduce ambiguity with whatever your goals are, and to be as authentic to yourself in with the message you're promoting. And we'll dive into that. So first thing, my first question I'm just going to ask is, motivating. It comes down to motivating, and the question I have is, what type of leader has motivated you? What type of qualities do they have? And so just type in your questions or type in your comments and let me know what you think, because I know I have my opinion, but I'd like to hear what other people say, so I'll give you a moment to do that.
I also broadcast this question too, so it's I typed it down in our in our so Josh says that positivity. Oh, that's what I was going to say too, Josh. So, someone who has a clear understanding of where they want to go. Oh, that's a really good, nice.
Josh, I really appreciate you sending that out, so I know I'm not talking to myself right now. So thank you for that. You're wonderful.
Good. Anybody else have something about what type of team leader motivates you? I think Ryan's going to answer a good that question for us too. But I really like Josh's answer. That's what I was going to say too. I really like it when somebody's really positive, and not just positive because I guess they have to be because they're there as the leader, but because I guess kind of because they want to be, right? Like they have, I think what Josh said too, who has a clear understanding of where they want to go, what they're up to.
Okay. Do we have any other comments?
That was it.
Okay, thank you, Josh. So motivating is a leadership responsibility, and for your group as ambassadors, or as working with a nonprofit, you're really about inspiring people as a leader. And effective leaders minimize ambiguity in the organization or the team, and they make it pretty clear about where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're doing. And we'll discuss that in a couple slides. But for you, that is when you reach out and you're working with your volunteers for the first time and you're engaging them, you're motivating is the single most important thing you can do. And we'll talk about how people buy into that. One thing to think about too is that if you're not always completely comfortable with leading, like let's say you're passionate about being ambassador, but you haven't really led before, realize that it's a skill that can be developed and that all different personality types can be leaders. So if you're not somebody who is, completely extroverted or gregarious, you can still motivate people and have them support you. And segue into the next slide, because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This next portion of the presentation focuses on, it was written by Simon Sinek. He's author of The Golden Circle, and he talks about how messages are delivered, and we got permission and everything, but I think this is the best way to think about how are your messages delivered. So the Golden Circle, and the reason why we're tying this in is that when we think about motivating people, we have to understand how we deliver messages and what really inspires behavior and causes action. So most organizations can tell you what they do. They can tell you how they do it, but they can't really tell you why they do it. And examining this a little closer, the what's are pretty easily. These are the tangible things we know what we're going to do. So let's say, you're an ambassador. You can go up and you can tell people, we're going to go and we're going to clean up the forest, and we're going to, and how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to get people from all across the region and everything. But we may not always know why we're doing it. We may not always think about why we're doing it. And that why is really the important portion. So another example, in my own life, I spent my teenage years working in a family business at Pike Place Market. And this business was, it was small. It was about 7 to 8 people, just family and everything. And so when we started, we did what most organizations do. We decided what we were going to do. We decided that we were going to sell soul food. And how are we going to be different? How are we going to be special? We'll sell at Pike Place Market. We'll have the marketing conditions there. We'll be a unique entity. But we never asked ourselves why we were doing what we're doing. And as we kind of got into the rhythm of running this business and we started running into issues, people became disillusioned. And I think we've all felt that in a job at some point of, you look up one day and you're like, why am I here? What is what I'm doing now? How does that tie into the bigger picture of the team, the organization? And that's how we end up kind of losing ourselves. And as a leader, having a strong why keeps people together. It keeps people knowing why they're here in the first place. So let's using the example of that family restaurant I talked about, if we communicate the message differently, instead of saying that we're just going to sell soul food at Pike Place Market, what if we would have started with, we grew up eating this soul food on Sunday dinner. It was a big part of our culture. It was a big part of who we were, and we want to bring that same family experience across everywhere. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to go to places that don't really usually have soul food, Pike Place Market, North and Everett, whatever it is. And what are we going to do? We're going to sell high quality soul food. But what's nice about when we deliver that message with that strong why is it makes it authentic. It makes it something bigger than just pursuing a profit or or some result. And it's a deeper meaning that when you're in the trenches of it and you're tired and you're putting in your blood, sweat, and your tears, you can really, you know why you're here. And you're, as a leader, constantly communicating the why is so important to people who are looking for us and looking for a clear direction. The nice thing about this type of delivery in terms of message is that it's not rooted in psychology, but it's rooted in biology. So when we communicate with a what, we're just speaking to our neocortex and our prefrontal cortex. And this is our rational thinking. This is where our language comes from, our logic and everything. But this doesn't activate the gut feeling we have. And for those of you who have had small children and who have, said, hey, can you do this? And they'll always say, well, why? Well, we told them what to do, but we didn't make the connection emotionally for why they should be doing something. And we function the same way as adults, that, we're just being told what to do doesn't drive behavior. However, if we focus on the why, and that's your authentic message, that's who you are, that's why you're here, it resonates with people because it activates the limbic brain in your limbic system, which is all about your emotions, your feelings, our trust, or loyalty. It's the stuff that's hard to define, and that's just ambiguous. It's our gut feeling. It's why we trust people, and it's where our decision making is made. So as a leader, trying to promote your organization, trying to deliver your message, think about why are you doing what you're doing, and ask people, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they here? And why is this important to them? And it helps people feel connected to the organization and to you, and vice versa, which pays off huge later on down the line. With that being said, before we move on to the next section, are there any questions or comments about motivating in the golden circle?
The chat room is quiet. Thanks,
Okay.
Ryan.
Cool.
A couple more minutes. But I think usually my experience in our other Cascadia Speaks have been that sometimes it's a good thing when the chat room is quiet because you're doing such a great, thorough presentation for us. You're answering all our questions as you go.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll move on to positive team behaviors. And so once you've motivated and you've communicated with your team, now we focus on, well, how do we build this? How do we build a healthy environment? How do we keep people vested with us? And some of the main things I've seen with teams I've worked with at Boeing is that your healthier teams have these 4 components to them: compassion, vulnerability, open communication, and self-care. Compassion, and this coming from you as an ambassador, as a leader, is really about minimizing us versus them thinking. Whether it's within your own group, making sure that we're all in it together, not letting coalitions be formed, not letting silos be built through your processes or how your work is done. And also as a leader, coach people in private. Make sure that, if they are struggling with something, give them time to, I might have something going on in the background, so hopefully you're not picking up on my microphone. But coach them in private, and praise them in public. Give them an opportunity to reflect on it and let people's good work be noticed by other people. Because I think we've all worked in jobs or positions where all we really wanted was our boss to acknowledge or leader to acknowledge the work we've been doing. And take advantage of people's talents. So what I mean by that is, we spend so much time, like as you get to know your team, if you have somebody who's a great web designer or somebody who is really engaged in an art or something, ask them, see if they'd like to use that talent with your team or your organization. There might be, they'll feel more vested. They'll know that you're paying attention and that you're engaged with them, and you might have a skill set that you didn't know about. Next, we have vulnerability. And as a leader, this is about sharing aspects of your personal life and express interest in your teams as well. Once again, we've all worked for managers or for leaders that don't really seem like they're really engaged with us on a personal level. And there's always boundaries, but the more engaged you are and the more interest you express, the more people feel like that they're vested in what's going on. This one's so critical, but promote realistic optimism. It's okay to say that your work may be difficult, it may be hard, but it's okay to be hopeful and keep moving forward, and not get drowned down by kind of pessimism and everything. And that takes a lot of vulnerability to have a lot of hope. But keep that in mind as you're growing your group, and encourage your team to express ideas if they're unpopular. This mitigates group thinking, and the more people feel like they get to express ideas, the more they feel like that they're part of this team and that everybody kind of has an equal say in where they're going. This goes to our next point of open communication, and share the team direction and goals as much as possible. I can't stress this enough that as a leader, it's our job to always make sure that we're letting people know this is where we're going and this is what we're trying to accomplish and this is our timeline. This helps people know that, hey, we are on a path, and it connects them back to why we're doing this. Make sure those goals are also developed with all levels of the team. At my current job, we talk about this being employee involvement, but this is so big because even if it's just like a new intern or a new volunteer, ask them what their goals are and see how they can integrate into your goal for your team or your organization. And it will really help them feel vested and feel like they're coming back, especially as a volunteer. If somebody feels like, hey, they already asked my opinion, it's my first day here about what we should be doing, they're probably more apt to stay on board through the ebbs and flows. Reduce ambiguity. We'll talk about this in management systems, but make it as clear as possible about what people need to be doing and where they're going. We've all spent times in jobs or with groups where we spend 6 months to meet, maybe even a year, just trying to figure out, how do we do our job? How do I do this? And it's hard to feel vested when you're not even sure if you're doing the right thing or how to do it. And be open to conflict. If you see an issue, embrace it and come to a resolution. Talk about it as soon as you can. I can't, this is another one of my big things that, if something goes on and there's a conflict in your team or somebody left abruptly, address it and don't let gossip or rumor mills kind of fill in the blanks there, because that kind of can break apart a team. So address that as soon as you can. The last slide about promoting a team culture is avoiding burnout. I'd imagine as many of you as ambassadors or volunteers this isn't your you may have a full-time job outside of this, and you want to encourage your team to practice self-care as much as possible. What I have listed below is just different ways we might look at it. Everybody's is a little different, but I would really encourage, especially as a leader, when you're working through this, not only should you just be promoting, work-life balance, people taking breaks and everything, but you also have to demonstrate it. You should take vacations so your team knows it's okay to take vacations, because if you're working, let's say 40 to 60 hours a week on a project, your team's probably going to follow the same suit because they think that's the expectation. So always take time to take care of yourself, to take care of your team, and just encourage them to look after themselves. And with that being said, we're going to move on to our problem solving in our management systems. This is my favorite portion because I think a lot of organizations, we don't really talk about how to solve problems and how we should manage a lot of the work that we're going to do. So first is our problem solving culture. Now, this isn't maybe something that I've seen discussed too often in other organizations, but any organization will encounter a problem in its life cycle. That's just the nature of working with people and doing the type of work that we do. But what's important is having an established process for problem solving and letting your team respond quickly to problems. And what I mean by that is a lot of the times, if there's an issue that comes up, maybe immediately just go to a boss. We just go to kind of like our all-star person and they solve it. But if you talk about, well, how do we want to solve our problems and how do we want to work through them? It gives people some clarity when an issue does come up. And as a leader, and as an ambassador, encourage your team to identify and solve problems of their own or bring their own solutions. This can ease the burden off your back because now you're not relied on solving everything by yourself, and you can kind of delegate it out, and also makes the team feel more empowered. One thing I recommend is this analysis, a SWOT analysis, and it's great for identifying problems initially. Or just kind of the nature of your team or your organization, the work you want to do ahead of time. The 4 quadrants break down as, what are the strengths of your team, what are the weaknesses of your team internally, and then what are some external things that are going on that may hamper your ability to succeed or opportunities you might have. So I created a draft one for the family restaurant I talked about. And in our first quadrant, which is an internal team strength, we had a high quality project. We had experienced chefs and a unique branding. But we had poor internal communication. We had no standards for recipes. And down in external stuff, we had a tourist attraction with being at Pike Place Market, and we were the only product like that in the area. Unfortunately, we opened up in 2002, so we had an economic recession around that time, and that was just something we couldn't control. For your teams, I recommend going through the same type of tool. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, but just going through with your team and having an honest conversation about what is, let's say, for example, you're focusing on environmental cleanup. You might have a dedicated team, and you might have all the tools at your disposal in terms of hardware and everything, but you might be spread out across I-5. Some of you may be based out of Tacoma, some of you may be based in Arlington. And externally, you might be, let's say, a challenge you might have is you might be in a county that's a little bit more conservative and is hard to get access, is hard to get local support, but you also may be have a college 30 minutes away that you can pull on. So think about using this type of tool because it helps outline any problems or any gaps you might have before, so when they do arise, you know how to react to it. You can kind of build a contingency plan. This next tool is probably my favorite that I've done at Boeing and throughout my years of problem solving, but it's just this 5-step problem solving method. And what's nice about it is just this simplicity, because often, once again, let's say that we're working in a nonprofit and we have an administrator who leaves, and this administrator did everything, and abruptly they decided to join the Peace Corps and they're gone. Well, our initial reaction might be, okay, we're going to be scrambled, we're going to try to figure this out, but let's take a step back and really define what the problem was. And really our problem wasn't the fact that this person left, but it was the fact that we didn't have any standards set in place or anything documented in case this person did leave. And that would be our really define our problem, and identifying our root cause would be, okay, well, why didn't we have any of that? Did we just rely on them? Did we never talk about having those standards? And once you go through that root cause tool, and there's some other ones that I'll share if anybody's interested in seeing that, is identify your solutions. And And I do make that plural because often we may only think about one or two solutions, and we should really think about maybe 5 to 6 if we can, because some solutions might work in the short term, some might work in the long term, and we should experiment with them, see how are they working, and are they effective. And that goes back to once we implement them, we should always be reviewing the effectiveness of solutions. When you implement a solution, there should be a measure to say how much, is this successful for us? Is this working for us? And it lets you know, it just gives you a metric to track with. Another tool I like, because I really enjoy Foursquares, is when you are kind of laying out your solutions or maybe any projects you think about doing, this effort impact matrix is a nice way to kind of discern what type of projects or what type of solutions should we be using. And pretty self-explanatory, you want to go with quick wins and major projects. The beauty of this tool is that it allows people to really think about, it gives us all sort of insight about what type of project is going on, so we're not frustrated 6 months down the line because we knew before, hey, this is going to be a major project, it's going to take time, or this is going to be something that's going to go quick. So another simple tool that I like to use, and this ties in, I really think, to your organization as a whole, is in your team, is have a management system. And this is a really broad topic, but just the biggest thing is have agreed on standards of how work is going to be done. If they're meeting times, if they're your minute structure, if how you're going to recruit volunteers, you want to simplify and standardize your work as much as possible, so your volunteers or your employees, whoever they are, could just come right in and immediately start doing their work, and make it flexible for your team growth. You might have 7 people working with you initially. That might be 15 in 2 years, or it might be 4 in a year. So keep your management system flexible for that type of stuff, and keep that in mind. I added this late last night, but training is so important. I think, once again, we've all been in jobs where we felt like that we could have used, another 6 weeks worth of training, and really think about, if I'm a new person who's full of ambition and excitement, am I getting the right training I need? And your management systems, they only work if they're sustained and maintained, and they should always be reviewed, and seen and to see their effectiveness. And if you're talking to the people that you're working with and your volunteers, they can give you some feedback on your management system as long as you're promoting that open communication and that type of dialogue. So with that being said, I'll open the floor for discussions, if there's any questions or anything. And yeah, so thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We'll see if any questions come in or anything. I really appreciate my favorite part of your presentation, and I've gotten to see it and hear it a couple times as we've been practicing over the last few weeks. It's been so great. Is just about the problem solving, as far as being prepared ahead of time for problems, because pretty much everywhere I've ever worked or volunteered for, any organization I've ever been in, there's always this sort of elephant in the room when a problem comes up, because no one really knows what to do, and it makes everyone feel uncomfortable. And so I think that's such a great thing to be prepared for it and then address it directly and immediately, because that just can make everybody just feel so much more comfortable. It's a lot easier for leaders, but it's even the person, like me, sometimes is a volunteer way in the back of the room. It's more comfortable for me when I can tell that the leaders of the team or the organization are comfortable with problems happening. So
yeah, well, and a follow-up comment with that. So a lot of I'll say American companies, that's more I'm familiar with, are very adverse to hearing about problems or things that are negative, and it's not a realistic place to live in to think that you're never going to run into a problem or you're never going to run into anything like that. And some of like the Japanese automakers embrace it as just part of their daily work. They just know they're going to run into this stuff. And this helps everybody because people are more apt to bring up issues. They're more apt to discuss, just have these conversations. And nobody feels like, hey, if I bring up a problem that I'm going to get shut down or just dismissed from it, or even have some sort of repercussion. And I think it's absolutely critical that every organization recognizes that, that it's okay to have problems. It's kind of why we're an organization in the first place.
That's great. Well, we have just just a thank you in the chat room then, Ryan. So again, I think that you did a very thorough, great job for us here.
Okay.
I think you have some resources to share, and then I just wanted to make sure everybody knows the resource screen coming up here. These resources are also going to be in your follow-up email for this webinar. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment or let us know if you need more, help than this screen. But and Ryan's available for help with that too. I'm sure he'll tell you about that.
Yeah, and just to add a couple things to this, like I said, the Golden Circle, Start With Why. There's great resources there that he dives into it much deeper than I do. But if you're thinking about what your own why is, I would discuss that. I know for me personally, my why is that I felt like there's a lot of just wonderful knowledge that you get in the private sector that doesn't always get flown out to people who are just trying to get their organizations off the ground or their teams. And I'm available as a resource to if you have any questions about problem solving or how to craft your message of why. And I think that a lot of public groups and volunteers and grassroots, they have so much passion, but they just sometimes need a little bit of help. Other thing is self-care. It's a presentation with Succeeding with Difficult Children, but they talk about avoiding burnout. Great resources there. The SWOT chart. There's a pretty standard template, but you can find on Wikipedia. If you're really interested and you'd like reading, Effective Human Relations is fantastic. It's a bit of a read, but it goes into so much about how do you build a team and develop them, and more in depth than I can in a 30-minute presentation. So with that, I think Bethany's going to send out my contact information. So if you want to give me a call or shoot me an email or anything like that, let me know. Like I said, I'm a resource, and I just love to talk and get your opinion, or just know what any type of struggles you're having and see how I can help support you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan. What a great presentation. Very helpful for anybody working in your whole presentation makes me think of just any group dynamic I've ever been in, from work to volunteer, and especially in a volunteer situation or people working on getting a group together to try to get something going. It's just such a lot of helpful stuff. So thank you so much. And I know that you will be available for helping anybody who was registered for the webinar. Then we'll get Ryan's email and phone number in that follow-up email. And if you have any other questions or comments for us, please reach out. You can reach out to We Love Cascadia at CascadiaNow.org. You can reach out to Ryan. His email was on the previous screen. You can leave us a comment. We'll be checking on those. So we'll be available. So thank you all so much for attending. There's going to be more exciting bioregional based Cascadia Now webinars coming up on Friday, May 20th at 1. We're proud to present a virtual tour of our absolutely amazing sustainable building and community living venture, which is a Cascadia Now project, the Living Bus Project. I'm so excited about that. So you'll have a virtual tour and you'll get to ask the builder questions. So be sure to check out the CascadiaNow.org events calendar. Follow us on your favorite social media. And we're using the hashtag CascadiaSpeaks, so you don't miss out on anything. I hope you all have a really great afternoon. Thanks so much for attending. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to any of you in the future.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.